As we're laying here on our backs, start to feel the belly expanding, letting our breath have so much room, so much space. Our big focus for class today with Yin Yoga is focus on the hips and also the low back, those two areas that are very connected. Now, energetically, the chakra that regulates those areas is the Sacral Chakra. And the Sacral Chakra deals with creativity. And so creativity will be our big focus as we travel through our class today. It's almost like this question that's resting in the back of the mind. What can I do with my creative energy that I have? So maybe that's a new project we'd like to work on that we've always been dreaming of doing, but we just have never quite done it before. So maybe that's what's going to start welling up within us throughout our class today. Or perhaps it's a lifestyle change that we would like to make for ourselves. We've always kind of wanted to. It's maybe a dream, a hope, a goal. So whatever it is that we can do with our creative energy, let that question rest in the back of the mind as we travel through our slow meditative class today. So creativity. So with that idea to lead us on, we're going to start off with our knees gently coming into the chest. Already we're giving ourselves a chance to rock, just to check in with that low back. See how the energy of it is doing right now. Maybe it feels depleted and we're working on feeling it through class today. Or maybe it's the opposite, hyperactive, and it needs focus. It needs something for us to tune into. So another breath or so of this rocking. And then eventually we're going to head into this type of a twist. What we do is set the left foot down. The right knee crosses over the left knee. And I like to bump the hips about an inch to the right before my knees start to fall over to the left. So they're bent right while they're right here. And then they start to fall over into a nice twist to that left side. Perhaps the arms spread open, setting up a nice grounded root to twist from. And if you've never done Yin Yoga before, Yin Yoga is this slow journey to let us go deep into the muscles. And the way that we do this is by holding the poses a bit longer than we might in a regular yoga class. We hold them somewhere between 3 to 5 minutes each pose. So what this does is get us past the muscular stretch. It just takes about 30-45 seconds or so to get to that muscle stretch. It gets us past that point so that overall flexibility improves. We're stretching not just the muscles, but the tendons, the ligaments. We're improving the circulation. We're letting the whole joint really expand open. And we're going slow so that it all has time to gently stretch and then gently, like a spring, gently come back. So no rushing in our class today. In fact, constantly be with the body, checking in. If ever it's painful and you need to back off a little bit, absolutely you have my permission to do that. Or sometimes in poses, you get into the shape and you start realizing, ooh, maybe I could actually start to go deeper. And so there's always that invitation to be with the body. And if that's what it's asking you to do, take it. Take it or leave it. So here on this first side, as we're starting to feel the hip and the low back quite intensely, quite nicely. Just check in with it. Be present physically for this moment so that we can be like that servant of the king that's there. If the king gets hot, we fan it. If the king gets hungry, we feed it. The king gets thirsty, we give it drink. That's like our body. We're here, we're being the servant to the body so that whatever it needs to be in such great depth, we're there for every little command to take care of it the very best that we can. And it's interesting because by taking care of the body in that way, the king or the ego actually gets to the point where it's not so demanding of us because it knows that it's taken care of already. We put it on such a high, valuable place that it doesn't have to be the dictator anymore. Let's just take one more deep breath on this side. And then we always come out of the poses nice and slowly. So gradually the hips start to return. As the hips become solidly on the ground, make sure to recenter them on the mat. And then maybe it's nice to do a few nice windshield wipers just to loosen up the hips. They gradually go left and right. Just loosening up anything that feels extra tight right now. And sometimes the recovery takes a little bit longer. You feel like a few more times would be what you need to really give the body the best that you can. Eventually, when it feels time to take the left thigh over, then we'll start to bump the hips over to the left, and the knees will take that twist over to the right that time. I never rush into a deep spot with the twist in yin yoga. It's more like a melting quality. It's like chocolate that's heating up. It doesn't just go from solid to liquid immediately. There's a slow process where now it's kind of both. It's kind of solid and liquid. And then as you continue to heat it up, or in other words, let your body relax into it, then it turns to that liquidy state where the muscles are able to stretch so nicely. So just be with the body in this journey. Feel how the breath is flowing for you and how the breath helps the muscles relax even deeper. Now as that low back is in this deep stretch, take a moment to tune into creativity. Is there a spark of energy that wants to come out in a certain way already? One more beautiful inhale. And once again, that slow release. Take your time, maybe uncrossing the legs first. And then hips return to the ground. Hips recenter on the mat. And a few of those nice windshield wipers. Oftentimes we start discovering things that are tight in this hip joint area. And so this is just that opportunity to make sure everything's still connected and flowing together. Just because we may isolate a muscle group in a stretch doesn't mean that it stays isolated the rest of the day. We have to reintegrate it into the body. So maybe one more set, left and right. And then to start heading into the next shape, we're going to work our way up toward a seated place. Some people like to roll directly up. Some people like to go through a fetal position and then press their way up through the side. So personal preference on how you arise. No rush at all. And then once we are up, take your feet toward the back of your mat and let's lower all the way back down onto the belly now. This will start getting our hip to open in a whole different way. What we're going to do is bring the arms out in front of us. The forehead or the side of the head rests onto the stacked palms. And then the right knee slides through the side to make its way close to the right shoulder. You choose how far it goes. We're trying to get the hip to open. Essentially, this is a half frog pose. We're going to get each side to do half frog before we build up to the full frog. So using this as a kind way to start letting the hip open. Now you may notice the neck is very comfortable being directly down. It may be nice to let your head gaze off to one side or off to the other, if that feels better. If you do gaze to one side, just pay attention to which side it is so that when you switch legs, you also switch the head. Start to tune into the belly, breathing into the ground, giving yourself a nice massage. All those intestines that help us to digest and absorb the nutrients from our food. We're massaging it out so that the absorption isn't just stuck in one area. We're spreading all of the stuff out to increase the absorption, taking more nutrients than we normally might. And with all those extra nutrients, imagine we're collecting energy into our sacral chakra, energy that we can then use toward our creative endeavors. So we're on our last 3 slow, beautiful breaths for this side. And after the 3rd breath, the right leg starts to slide long, all the way down to the ground. Once we've got 2 long legs, let the hips rock around for a moment as if we're doing a little samba dance. Just shaking those hips left and right, loosening up any stuck areas out of the hips. And when that feels complete at some point, we'll begin to take the second side, left knee starting to slide all the way up. If your head was to one direction before, switch it here. Continue to breathe that belly into the earth. Imagining we're still helping increase the flow of energy into our body. And it's the easiest energy we've ever had because all it takes is laying here and breathing. So take 3 more beautiful breaths. Allowing them to slow their pace down. Only after the 3rd breath completes, begin to slide this left leg back down. Just start. A moment to rock the hips left and right. And then bring the hands to plant under the shoulders to help us press back for a brief child pose. Feel how the spine is opening up. That low back is lengthening. This is still just a recovery pose for a few breaths. And then coming up onto all 4s, we begin to take a couple of huge hip circles. So hips are tracing clockwise, the widest circle you could possibly go. And then when you finish that one, counterclockwise. And take another 1 to each direction. Beautiful. If the spine wants another cat-cow as well, let the spine move around like that. Keep on recovering if the muscles still need it. Eventually we head to full frog pose here. When you're heading there, we face eventually toward the long edge of our mat. And you may have enough padding already. If you need more padding, my recommendation, fold your mat over at least once or twice on each side to give your knees lots of padding before we bring our knees onto them. Spreading super wide. Wanting the knees to go about as wide as they can, so sometimes the roll needs to back off a little bit, but sometimes it's already perfect. And peeking at the mirror, you can see if the hips are exactly in line with the knees. You don't want them rocked forward. You don't want them backward like child pose. You want them right at that high spot in the middle. And I also like to make sure that there's a 90-degree angle in the knee joint, so the shins are dropping directly straight back from you. Usually dropping to elbows is the easiest variation for people, but occasionally I have somebody who wants to widen the elbows to start dropping the heart down. So that is an option if it's available, but please don't feel your need to force it too soon. We're getting to the spot where it's still tolerable. It's not too intense because we're still going to be here about 2 more minutes. So keep on breathing. But always know you have that permission to come out earlier if that's what the body needs. We're not being forceful. We're just inviting a very deep expression to come into the hips today. Oftentimes when things get intense, I lose my breath. So this is an invitation to keep focus on the breath the whole time. Keep the breath flowing in, all the way to the belly. And long, slow exhales. Already almost there. Try to go for 5 more slow belly breaths. And as the 5th one begins to complete, you can head out through child pose, but I personally like to head out by sliding the hips forward until they rest on the ground. Once I'm there, I pick up my feet and turn my legs into windshield wipers. Knees are starting to feel much better. Welcome to go a few more cycles of windshield wiper. But when it feels pretty complete, we're going to rise up, open the mat back out, and come to a seated place. From here, we head to shoelace. So this is right knee on top of left knee, if that's possible in the hips. Sometimes one hip just lifts off the ground like crazy when we try to do that. So if that's the case, you can back down to more like shin on top. That would be perfectly fine. And sometimes that still has the hip lifted, so that would be dropping down to cross leg. So you've got options. Pick the one that lets you stay comfortably. And this is the only requirement for the next couple of minutes. Sometimes people will immediately start to go forward. I personally am going to set up a shoulder stretch and then go forward. So if you'd like to join me, we're going to take the left hand to the back. Usually I start off with the low back, but sometimes I can start wiggling up to the middle back or maybe in between shoulder blades. And then my right hand is just going to be helpful. So sometimes it's helpful by holding onto wrist, or walking up toward the forearm, maybe up to the elbow. And I feel that deep left shoulder stretch. So that's all I need to do for here. I'm personally going to start moving forward now that I've got the shoulder in a stretch, but some people's hips are already intense enough just staying up. Some people might have the right hand to the ground as we lean forward. Or if it gets too intense on left shoulder, free out the left shoulder and drop the left hand down also. So no requirements on exactly what you have to do, but we're experiencing a deep expression, especially through hips and maybe through shoulder also, whatever that looks like. Specifically, we're helping the shoulders out here because I've noticed a lot of my tension tends to be in shoulders. So when I can loosen some of that tightness right out, that makes it naturally so my creativity flows better. I'm not fighting against the tightness that can be present in the body. And remember, at any time you do have permission to release, if simply leaning forward helps you just get deep in those hips. Taking 3 more slow breaths to this pose. And after all 3, we can gently rise, free out the shoulder. Start to help our spine be supported in the lift. And we take our time unwinding the legs. I'm personally going to let the legs open up nice and wide. And then as I'm leaning back, just let the knees have little bounces. Just feeling how all those muscles that were being pulled so deeply are now able to go back to that jello jiggly loose state. Good. So from that type of freedom, we begin to head to the second direction. This one has a right tucked under, left over, and then our right hand starts to work its way up the back. And pay attention to the hips. Maybe on the other side if the hip wasn't lifting, but if it does on this side, you can back down a level. So that's always gonna be fine. Right hand is maybe at the low back, middle back, or maybe all the way up in between shoulder blades. Left hand is just helping, whatever that looks like. So the shoulder joint being pulled long down away from the ear. Perhaps we stay upright with our spine, if that's the best variation. Or we always have that option to start leaning forward, with or without the same amount of pressure on the shoulder, with the release at any point available to us. If you feel a deep intensity, you can release a little bit or focus on the breath. Using the breath to help calm it down. Wherever we're at, this is our last 3 breaths through this pose. A slow return back up. Opening the legs again. Usually it'll be my hands that support them, so no muscular efforts required immediately. Maybe the same bouncing motion feels great, or maybe you prefer some nice windshield wipers a few times. Taking a little bit more time if needed. And then when we're ready, we're going to lift up to downward facing dog. The hips start to lift up high. Feel that expression through the legs. Maybe a couple of wiggles through the knees. And then heading toward a dragon shape. I like to personally lift right leg up for a moment and then ultimately step right foot to the outside of right hand. The back knee is welcome to drop down to the ground. Always know you can fold over the side of the mat to pad the knee if needed, since we're holding this for a little while. But eventually, what we're trying to do is build up the flexibility in this right hip. So my first recommendation, and again, just play with it until it feels like that's good enough. So first, hips are sinking forward, and then the right toes start to turn off to the right side. From here, if you want more, I bring my right hand to the right thigh and start inviting that thigh to rotate open. Sometimes I even drop the left hip down a little bit. For all or part of the time, make sure it's not too much for the wrist. You can always even drop down to the elbow if it gets to be too much for the wrist. And again, a variation you can play with for all or part of the time is lifting up the back toes and grabbing onto that to even let the spine spiral open. Only if that feels nice, kind, helpful. Always know if all or part of this pose needs to be released a little bit early, that's fine. Just feel how the hips can open, at least for the amount of time that we have, that we give for it. This one's pretty intense, so we won't stay here quite the full time. Let's go for those last 3 breaths. And then start returning. That gentle return journey. Hands eventually can plant. If you'd like to work on hip circles, that's fine. Or if the downward facing dog shape feels nice, you can head directly up to that place. Wiggles for a moment before we switch sides. And then whenever you're ready, if you like the lift of left leg, just step the foot to the outside of left hand, that's fine. Make sure it's set up such that hips can release forward. For perhaps left toes start to turn up to the left side. Maybe left hand on the thigh, helping to push it open. Always know that elbow option is fine. Maybe the back toes lift for all or part of the time. Heading toward the end, feel the breath slowing down. And last 3 breaths. When we get to the release, again, do you want hip circles or would you like the down dog? Yeah. Continue to have wiggles if needed to help you loosen up all the tight areas. When you're ready to start heading to the next shape, we come down toward a seated place again. From the seated place, our legs are going to take kind of like a pinwheel shape. Our right leg is crossed in. The left knee is tucked back. Always know you can point the knee to different angles if the knee is having issues, or if it's having issues enough that this is painful already, you can even just head that one open as well, more like a cobbler's pose. So as long as this is okay, we're gonna start heading forward toward right leg. If you head toward the direction of the knee, that'll be the easier variation. If you head toward the shin, that's a little bit deeper. So personal preference. Feel how the low back is able to gently release in this shape. Forward folds like this are a great time to start coming into introspection. And so perhaps take this time to really be honest with yourself, checking in with that creativity. I have all this energy in my sacral chakra, energy that wants to do something creative, to make something that didn't exist from this life. So what is it that I would like to do with that energy that I have? Is there some good that I can do for the world and really only me? It's like I was made to do that thing. And you can either stay in this exact shape, or if you choose to continue to evolve this pose, it could begin to look like a pigeon pose. Front leg stays exactly as it is, but maybe back leg starts to straighten. And maybe you pick your hips up to balance evenly. It's not a requirement, but if that feels like that would feel good in the body, you're welcome to continue to evolve the pose. Continuing to check inward. Last 3 breaths for this direction. And start to unwind. Maybe the legs open up wide. A brief moment, maybe slightly forward just to stretch the legs and the back long. Taking your time. When the recovery feels complete, left leg slides in. Right knee tucks back. We start to lean forward either to the thigh or toward the middle of the shin. Yeah, if your knee's not comfortable, just keep on playing with it. It can go forward, it can go wider. There's no good that happens when our knee is just in pain. And perhaps this is the place where we'd like to continue to evolve the pose, getting it further and longer behind us. last 3 breaths. Perhaps same recovery. Legs long for a moment. We've had many bent knee poses, so just a brief chance to let things lengthen. And our last long held pose of the day will be a cobbler's pose. Eventually, bottoms of feet start to work together. Complete personal preference. Does it feel best for the hips if the feet are further? Does it feel best for the hips if I'm trying to tuck the heels all the way close to the pelvis? Personal preference. And also personal spine position that helps the hips and the low back feel good. Some days that does need just staying up tall, letting the hips open like the covers of a book. Other days that leaning forward pulls some of these deep muscles super long. So maybe that's what you're seeking for instead. And maybe this is another chance to be with the neck. Loosening up any neck and shoulder tightness. Just because the body is more or less in the same pose doesn't mean we're stuck in the same position. You can absolutely wiggle in ways that feel the most kind and the most hopeful. Start to head to the last 3 breaths here. And after the last 3, the spine rises up. At last recovery pose, when we're ready for it, will be a happy baby pose. So we're welcome to start bringing the spine all the way to the ground. Grabbing onto ankles or feet. Let the legs be here, knees open. You can have stillness through this, or you can move around. Maybe rocking around for that low back. Maybe give a nice massage. Maybe extending one leg all the way up to the sky. And then the other. There's no pressure, there's no right and wrong. It's whatever last movements will give the hips or the legs one more chance just to lengthen, to open, so that ultimately we can find a very peaceful resting pose for our Shavasana. Don't rush to get into your Shavasana, but when you are ready, choose the variation that will help your back and hips feel the best. So maybe eventually it's legs just resting open on the ground. Maybe feet stay planted today, knees falling inward to one another. There's many variations. Just choose the one that would be the highest good for your body today. When you start to settle into that shape sooner or later, start to let the breath take over. Letting this breath stir the pot of our creativity as we're resting here. Begin to feel the inhales and the exhales starting to deepen in length and in depth. Little wiggles begin to be introduced back into the body. And gradually these wiggles get bigger and bigger until eventually you feel ready to stretch like you're waking up first thing in the morning. Perhaps choosing to roll over to a fetal position. We feel a few breaths slowly flowing through our body, starting to bring us out of that meditative state and into a brainwave of deeper presence. Eventually finding a comfortable seated place when your body feels ready to arise. Hands joining together in front of the heart. We feel all that energy that we've cultivated and developed in that sacral chakra. We feel those urges to do something creative, whether it's cooking a new meal, learning a new instrument, painting an image that never existed before. Or maybe it's something different, a new habit, a new lifestyle starting to develop within us. So whatever it is that we would love to use this creative energy toward, we have this inspiration and this goal leading us onward. So with that, we wrap up this wonderful time we got to share together cultivating with the sound of Om. Taking a deep inhale now. May we be filled with light and happiness and peace. Namaste.